Thank you. Thank you to the Southeastern Jurisdiction Committee on the Episcopacy for hosting this. And let me just say it is an honor for me to be sitting on the stage with these very talented folks. In the SEJ, I have had a chance to meet the folks you see on the stage here and the folks that we heard yesterday, and I'm astounded by the abundance of talent that the SEJ brings to this place. It's an honor to be with you here. I'm here to tell you a couple of stories. The stories of ministry success. I have been a youth director most of my adult life. I started working in youth ministry from a young age and thought that that was what God was calling me into. But as always, your call evolves. While in seminary, I ended up in Richmond, Kentucky at Richmond First United Methodist Church and involved into a Saturday night contemporary preacher. While there, I learned that I could lead as a senior pastor when I was asked to fill in for my senior pastor who was taking a series of leaves. I learned that I could grow into different jobs, into different places. I learned about myself that you have to become what God lays in front of you. Two areas that I saw that happen. When I first left the practice of law, I took a job at Getwell Road in South Haven, Mississippi as the youth pastor. We had about 15 kids in the youth group. And over 2 years, we grew that ministry into about 125 kids that were meeting no longer in big groups all the time, but are meeting in small groups. We developed a group of leaders, of small group leaders, of both teachers, students, college students that drove in from Oxford, Mississippi, an hour and a half away to work with us on the weekends. You see, the success that we saw in that ministry there was never my success, but it was our team's success. Throughout my life, I've learned that I am better when I'm surrounded by people that are better than me, that bring gifts, skills, and graces that I do not bring. When we were at Getwell Road, we saw major change. We saw major growth. We saw young leaders emerge. But one of the most impressive moments for me was in 1999. I was preparing to go to Russia in that year, and we had a young lady in our church that was diagnosed with cancer, one of my youth. Her grandparents were raising her, and they couldn't tell her, so I had to go tell her. We talked and prayed through it. And before I left to go to Russia with Bishop Goodpastor and a few other folks, he wasn't bishop then, he was just Larry to us. Before we were leaving, we had a worship service in our youth group. We had about 100 or 120 of our kids there. We took our shoes off because we were going on holy ground. We broke out the book of worship, and we had a healing service from the book of worship for Jessica. And I got to pray with our folks, and we broke our hearts before God, and we knelt. And I got to pray with 7th grade boys. Have you ever seen 7th grade boys pray? And I got to pray with 7 of our 7th grade boys as they broke their heart for God. Flew to Russia, got to spend a few weeks trying to find a site for a summer camp that Mississippi was hosting. The next year we would take about 40 college and high school students to Russia. And in doing so, we were taken far outside of Penza, Russia, to a little hamlet that had a big, beautiful cathedral. They decided they wanted to show off the cathedral to us, and we all went there. And we were introduced to the Eastern Orthodox priest that was guarding the place. He was there with 2 elderly nuns. And he asked us where we were from. And Larry responds, well, we're from Tupelo. And he says, so you finally come to check on us. Excuse me? He said, you finally come to check on us. And he took us in the back. And he took out a bundle of shoebox tops. If some of you remember in 1991 when the famine hit Russia, the United Methodist Church responded with shoeboxes of food. And in that community, all of the shoeboxes packed by First United Methodist Church Tupelo landed. And we walked in there, and God's prevenient grace walked in before us, and He pulled out these box tops with names like Reed and Hill, with kids that were now seniors in high school. And God went before us. We got back on the bus to go back to where we were staying, and there was a man that was with us that had been videotaping us all day, and he kept asking, why are you here? Why did you come to us? Larry engaged him in conversation, and on the 2-hour ride, at the end of it, he knelt in the headlights beneath the jeers of the guards that were with us, and he gave his heart to Christ. He said, I can't do much, but I can tell people about Jesus. God was moving on that trip, and at 30,000 feet over the North Atlantic, I picked up the phone from the plane, and I made a phone call back to my secretary, Becky, who still works for Bill Beavers, I think, at the time. And I said, Becky, what's going on with Jessica? Because we hadn't had good news up until then. She was at St. Jude Research Hospital. She said, we sent you a message. Didn't you get it at your hotel? I said, no, what happened? She says, she's cancer-free. They got clean margins and clean lymph nodes. They'll see her in 6 months. And I got to walk into that youth group and look at those 7th grade boys and tell them the next week that God had healed Jessica. And the week before we get to Lake Junaluska, I will be at Lake Junaluska with my youth group now, at the church that I serve now. But before I go, I will get to go to Southaven, Mississippi, and I will get to perform Jessica's wedding. God moves. It's not me. It was God moving then, and God moves now. One of the things I'm most proud of is what we've done at First United Methodist Church, Indianola. I'm being tugged on, so I must quit. You can read about it on my website. Thank you for your time. You can see I'm passionate about the reign of God, about resurrection, about God moving. We do that through church plants. We do that through church revitalization. We do that through creating new paradigms and looking for visionary leadership for the next century. Thank you, and I will be quiet.